welcome to podcast number 3 of Women in Talent and How They Made Their Way with Kristiina from Coinmetro. So we're going to do a couple of introductions and then look to discuss how she got to where she is today, coming from a legal and law background in different industries, how you found it moving into this particular space, and also what you see the future of blockchain being and the evolution of the technology and the technology advances and disadvantages it's had. And what challenges you found from hiring diverse talent, and also more importantly, what we can do to influence talent coming into the industry from a female perspective, and also just to bring an influx of talent through the door from a more junior age. So, brief introduction about me. So I work for Interquest Group. I'm one of the managing consultants heading up the European office based in Amsterdam. Now, this is with a pure focus of risk, regulatory and compliance related matters within financial services in its entirety. So that's cryptocurrency companies, lenders, payments, cards, and traditional banking from its background as well. Kristiina?
Yes, hi. Well, my background is, if we go back to 2005, when I started as a very young lawyer, I decided to take up a job in a ministry. So I went to the public office. And at that time, actually, if we're talking about technology in Estonia, then the public sector was the driver of all innovation and technology. And we started building the Estonian e-health information systems. Everything was on paper. I mean, when I started, like today, it seems insane, and young people probably can't grasp it really well. But I was literally running with papers from one office to another to gather signatures to get the document over the line. So that's how I started my career, and there was no regulation either. So if you're building a digital new system, especially for health data, which is very, very sensitive, and you have to make sure it doesn't get into the wrong hands, etc. So it was a very fascinating kickoff for my career. Then I went on in public service to different other areas, also energy. And finally, I was for 3.5 years in the Ministry of Justice. There was also head of department. And then I decided to finally go into private sector, was in law firms, and then became a corporate lawyer. And so when I came to Coinmetro, I actually started in Coinmetro as senior legal. I got to be senior legal, I think, for a month. And then as a compliance officer was leaving, I was approached by the owners to take on more, so to take on AML. And the first thing that I noticed was that, it's one thing if you change one specialist, even if it's like a superhero type of specialist to another, it's still one person. So what you need actually is you need to build a system. So that's what I was doing in Coinmetro until the 1st of February this year, for almost 2 years. So building the entire compliance function, rules, team on 2 continents. So Coinmetro has 2 offices. One is in Tallinn, Estonia, and the other one is in Cancun, Mexico. So I was building teams in 2 very different time zones. And also in the beginning, learning myself, so getting my hands dirty, actually doing the specialist work myself, going through Chainalysis trainings, learning how Bitcoin and Ethereum and other assets move on the blockchain, how to do transactions monitoring, what is important, what's maybe not that, because there's so much data. Also working with a risk manager, data department, etc. So, and you also have to take into consideration that during that time when I was in Coinmetro, I started, we were 21 people back in May 2021. And by the end of last year, Coinmetro was a little bit under 90 people. So it grew. My math is not that good, but
me neither.
four times at least. So the growth was very, very fast. So, I mean, we had a multitude of different issues, plus the regulation changed as well. during that time. Then we had the Terra Luna crash, FTX crash, and the Estonian regulator was very, very concerned because of some of the bigger banking scandals that had happened in Estonia years before. So the regulation was tightened over and over again, and we had to go through re-licensing, and we managed to keep our license, and also we're preparing for new licensing projects. So yeah, and on top of the compliance team, I was also building and leading the legal team for Coinmetro.
So there's some really interesting topics which I want to bring back and touch upon as well, because obviously going from a manual age, as you quite rightly say, you know, younger people wouldn't understand it, of having to write, because the world has gone automated and digital. So to begin with, how did you find it moving from a manual kind of signature on paper and a filing cabinet to everything being more of a belief in data with data-led decisions, particularly from a legal and compliance perspective as well, because these are all regulatory obligations. Having filing paper and trying to do what we would now do with GDPR, there'd be a massive difference and probably a lot of fines.
Well, I mean, I think like the fun thing about paper is that, well, unless you're really taking fingerprints all the time, you don't really know how many people have seen a piece of paper. But with a digital world, there's also always a fingerprint. So you can't really do anything without leaving a mark. Just to explain, when I started back in 2005, it wasn't all paper. So we did have ICT systems. So you did process documents and get consents, but then you had to print it and then also get it on a paper. So I think when I started, it was somewhere in between. So it was like this little bit of this, little bit of that. And then people were speculating whether paper will perish and we will all completely be digital, which is probably never going to happen. It's the same discussion with, let's say, crypto and fiat. Is fiat ever going to disappear? No, it's not. There are always people who want to have cash, who want to stay anonymous. And although crypto was built to give you an anonymity, it actually, I mean, you don't know who's behind the transaction. You just see the transaction hash and the wallet addresses. But you can trace every chunk of Bitcoin from the beginning of the times until like where they are today. You can never do that with cash.
Yeah, no, of course.
It kind of gives you this freedom that technology is not able to give you. So these two worlds will probably keep on existing in parallel and in cooperation. I'm pretty sure. But I mean, for me, the transition, I mean, you don't really think about it if you're just living it. It's just, you just go with it and life gets easier and faster. But there's always this big scare that if you have so much data in a cloud or in a state server somewhere, or if someone hacks, I mean, we've seen these things happen. With paper, really difficult. For instance, paper is really heavy. so that's why we have cold wallets and hot wallets and all sorts of solutions, because you actually need all of these things.
No, and obviously from going from public sector and kind of governance, corporate governance related roles, and then moving into more of a private sector, as you say, how have you seen a differentiation between data usages for compliance and legal related matters?
Well, I mean, if we're talking about data, I guess the knowledge there could be better in both sectors, frankly, because there's a lot of scare about using data after GDPR came live. Although the rules didn't really change that much, they had been the same for 15 years. I think there's maybe a little bit more consciousness in bigger companies and also in the public sector, whereas where the businesses are smaller and the priorities are elsewhere, also maybe data security is not top priority. So I think it's really linked to resources. Not that much public-private, but more about resources.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I obviously, from going from the legal background you had and also moving into more of a corporate law side, which is more around M&A, so your mergers and acquisitions, your corporate governance, any litigation and disputes. How was the transition from that particular area into regulatory compliance? And where would you say the synergies were between both of the roles?
Yeah, we also had these discussions within Coinmetro whether legal and compliance are contradictory. Yes. I would strongly argue that they aren't, because I mean, if you're building a compliance framework and rule set always for a private company, because you don't really need that in that sense in a public sector organization, then yeah, you're still looking for the gray area. Yeah. So you have to make sure that you're applying the regulation, the global best practice. But if you go into details, there are so many choices you have to make based on your risk assessment. So the law doesn't really give you what you have to do from A to Z. It really gives you very general understanding of what this regulation is. Then you can read into guidelines, etc. So I don't see legal actually being a blocker here. And working with different companies and different types of clients, I know very well how to mitigate risk and where I would tell my client this is maybe way too risky. There are certain risks that are never worth taking. No. Although even if there's like 30% of chance you can get away with it.
Taking the 30% of it, where would you say the biggest risks lie?
In where now exactly? You mean in AML?
Yeah, so obviously with AML coming as one of the major topics I think the regulator is pushing at the moment, where would you say the main risks would sit within that particular space for Coinmetro or alternative similar businesses?
Well, if we're talking about blockchain and crypto, yeah, what I've come across is that you can apply the traditional AML frameworks and be compliant. However, crypto kind of, even with MiCA, it still kind of falls outside the traditional risk assessments because, for example, traditionally everything is really like law is really local, regulation and rules and their supervision is really local. So the way regulators assess risk is how far your clients are from where your business is situated. But if we're talking about crypto and fintech in general and the world of internet, there's no national jurisdiction. It's everywhere all the time. So the risk is really not related to any geolocation except for North Korea, for example, for political reasons. Yeah. But otherwise, looking for Europe, clients in Northern America, for the Estonian regulator, for example, are high risk, but they really aren't. So the risk really isn't geographical in that sense, unless it's political or there are other reasons. But it's more about how the client does the client understand the technology? So elderly people, for example,
$1 million question.
Elderly people are the ones who are actually high risk, not clients from the US. So we were seeing an influx of very high risk clients, for example, from Germany, Italy, etc. People who had their entire life savings to spend and who are, because they don't understand the technology, extremely easy to scam. Yeah. And the scamming level is that's a completely different podcast, but
we need more than an hour to talk about that. Obviously, with cryptocurrency and regulators, they're warming up to the idea of trying to understand how it works and working with businesses to see how it's regulated. But with Coinmetro, say they're not a cryptocurrency business, but what they're trying to do is bridge the gap between traditional finance and traditional institutions and blockchain. How would you say that differentiates the regulators' application, but also willingness to find the grey areas?
I mean, well, if I now understood your question correctly, I mean, the regulators are trying to understand the technology, that's for sure. It is difficult if you're not actually on a daily basis monitoring transactions on a blockchain using Crystal or Chainalysis or other service providers yourself. Bridging the gap between traditional finance and non-traditional finance, well, I mean, that's whether that works or it doesn't, it's probably remains to be seen. I would guess that actually traditional finance companies here have the upper hand because of larger resources. So if they see that this is really a thing, and we can already see a few banks moving a little bit. I mean, I wouldn't say they're moving into crypto, but they are allowing their clients to open crypto accounts, basically in order to invest into certain crypto assets. But now we're moving into a territory of which crypto assets are stable and trustworthy enough to invest in them. And I mean, I'm not an expert in that area, but what we have seen, if we're talking about regulation, is that when an asset is not backed by a traditional secure asset, the volatility is extremely high. So the transparency of reserves, of assets being actually backed by either traditional fiat or, well, let's say Bitcoin, but even Bitcoin price came down with the Terra Luna crash. So, I mean, it's all related.
I think a lot of people had a very, very bad day that day. Obviously, with the focus in Coinmetro and also the use of blockchain technology, I think it was a technology advance we were all ignoring for a while, but it definitely is here to stay, and the usages of it are becoming more apparent and more widely used with different aspects. Where would you say blockchain is going, and what would you say the disadvantages and advantages of the technology is against your relative roles?
I think that if traditional banking figures out a way to move larger client funds faster because of technology, they're going to move into that area very, very quickly. I've seen government officials debating about having a blockchain version of a traditional fiat currency. It's a nice idea that might happen. I mean, now we're going into very high speculation. What I do think is that wherever what I've seen, wherever technology facilitates something that's currently difficult, then the move will suddenly be really fast. So what crypto and blockchain offers is actually a lot more transparency in transactions than we currently have. Yes, we can see the counterparty of a transaction, but we can't really see the full chain and all the different links between transactions. Now, if this is something that people actually want, together with regulation from traditional finance, I'm pretty sure that's going to happen really fast. The question rather is, do we want this transparency? Because
do we want to keep a few secrets?
Yes. So I mean, then there needs to be some sort of carrot to make people do that move, and and then cash will be reserved for less transparent transactions, I guess.
So what would you say the future of blockchain would be? Obviously that's some of the advantages and disadvantages, but how do you see it growing in the industry?
I think it offers a lot of people access to investment, especially younger people. It's a lot easier to understand technological tools when you want to invest. But I mean, in investing, whether it's in stocks or in crypto assets, you always have to do your own background checks.
Mm-hmm.
But when there's more regulation to protect investors and clients, I think people will, and especially young people, will want to move more towards crypto as an investment tool, because it's very, very fast. There's so many different options, and it's easier for younger people to understand crypto than, I don't know, Microsoft stocks.
That makes a lot of sense, and everything's gone more digital. So you have your non-traditional and your traditional banking, who are, you know, kind of dipping their toes in the water in terms of the immersive digitalization of the industry, but also the use of technology and blockchain in organizations. Whereas your fintechs and your cryptocurrency businesses are fully trying to immerse this into the business as much as possible, because it's exciting, it's new, it's innovative, it allows them to make decisions faster, but you can break it. People like to break it and then see how far they can push that technology before it fails, and then try alternative ways in order to make impact which they're trying to create, which is really good for people who have the agility and the agile mindset and enjoy failure. But then when you're bringing something which is so process oriented into a new way of working, it's a complete different mind shift, which I think is going to be the hardest part for the traditional banking to adopt.
Yeah. Plus, I mean, they still need to keep the face to the regulator of being really, really compliant, which makes them a lot slower. So this is not going to disappear, probably, and this gives the upper hand to crypto companies and exchanges, but also, I mean, as the centralized exchanges become more and more regulated, people still need this gray area. So we're probably going to see an emergence of new players coming into this mix, and because the technology and smart contracts and all of that is moving so fast, regulation is never ever going to be able, and it's not supposed to be able to move that fast, because otherwise the threat of over regulation is worse. But I mean, obviously,
sorry, carry on.
But I mean, obviously people still have to then understand the risks. So there are winners, there are losers. It's a little bit like a video game, and that's why people like it. And that's why also gambling companies are moving into this, because they want to give their clients not just ordinary gaming, but this
it's the risk versus reward for people, isn't it? It's the balance of both, but how much appetite have they really got, and how much reward can you get? So I suppose touching on that as well, what made you move into that particular industry, and how have you found it? What excites you within that particular space, but also the challenges within that space too?
I had worked with different clients and also different industries throughout my career, but I had never been in financial services. And when I started thinking about what do I want to focus on, because I had done so many different things, so I went back to university studying IT law masters, and I decided to want to have focus on technology and law. And although a lot has changed over the past 20 years, and we can see that there are bits and pieces of something that could be called the law of technology, it really still doesn't exist. So that's very fascinating. I like things that are not there yet. So you have so much room for imagination and creation, because I like to create new things. So and that's why Coinmetro seemed like a perfect fit, and that's why I also took on the challenge to build the AML function, because that was a learning experience for myself.
It's one of those industries where you're never gonna know everything, because it changes pretty much every day. So if someone's coming into that industry, and as someone that has to know everything, wants to know everything, what would you do to encourage them to join an industry where the regulator, us as people, and also experts like yourself don't necessarily have all of the information or knowledge that will be implemented?
Well, I mean, you have to have a very curious mind to do this. So if you have a curious mind, then I do encourage young people, regardless of sex, but also females, to go into this industry, because it gives you a massive learning opportunity. And to be frank, all the answers are not there. Nobody knows everything, but that's the beauty of it. So once you kind of get familiar with and not being scared of not knowing everything, then you're in a very good spot, because then you can start learning. Then you can start figuring things out for yourself, and then you can start creating new stuff that's not there. I mean, blockchain wasn't there. Somebody had to imagine it. Somebody had to create the first block. So, I mean, without that freedom, if you're only limited with things we know today, you can't really create anything. So you need to learn everything there is to learn. So everything we know with our heads, with our minds, everything we can read. And then you take that, you trust your gut feeling, and then you can go into the unknown and start discovering and creating.
I think that's a big point, is the creativeness, but the ability to actually make a decision and implement it yourself from a thought that you had or an idea that you had that you've been able to put into practice, which is an industry that people should want to get into, because it allows people to use their own ability, initiatives, and also knowledge in different ways, rather than following someone else's set process. It's, oh, this looks really interesting, how can we do that? Or I've had this, let me try it. And being able to put your own individual personality stamp on a particular area, but also learning a broader scope, because you get to be involved in more aspects of the business. How have you found that mindset implemented into the company? Where does it come from more? And I suppose, how's the diversity talent coming with that particular mindset? Is it more male-led? Is it more female-led? Who's got more of a risk appetite?
Well, I mean, if we're speaking statistically, then males are more prone to be risk-taking. I am probably not here a very good example of an average female, but that's also how we are raised. So there's a lot of there's a lot of society behind this. So if we put that aside, then and in Coinmetro, I actually didn't do that kind of calculation, but I never thought about, when hiring, whether a person is female or male. I never thought about myself as, oh, I'm a female leader, so what? I mean, it's not really a thing. I mean, it shouldn't be. And if you start feeling it, then something's wrong. But I never had that feeling in Coinmetro. I just went on because I had this curious mind. I wanted to learn, and the owner saw it. So we just went together. And when I was hiring, and when we were hiring in Coinmetro, it was more about finding people who could kind of create a very well-functioning team. So you would take people from different backgrounds, from Estonia, India, Mexico, Asia, and based on what's their learning index, what's their learning ability, what's their previous experience, and what's their culture, so that the culture fits together, so that you have a team that's driven to learn and create new things. Because the company was growing so fast, you need most people to have this growing mindset. But also bearing in mind that you at the same time also need the keepers, the people who are more stable, who like more routine, because the ones who are riding ahead, thinking about new things, they're not going to be maintaining what you have built.
Back to ground level at some point.
I mean, you need both.
It doesn't work without it. It's a really good balance between both capabilities, but put it together, you've got an amazing team, but also an amazing differentiation of knowledge, ability, and also curiosity, because you don't want too many people that are 100 miles an hour and 10 things at once because you're constantly like this, trying to wonder what way you're going in. But I suppose from what you've seen in the industry, all of the different industries you've been a part of, the different areas of legal and compliance you've been a part of, but also how you've seen your growth story, what would you say you think we should be able to put in place in order to influence younger talent and female and male talent to get into this industry?
Yeah, I think all girls should be encouraged to take risks and to fail.
Yes,
because you can't.
That's
really
a major
learn.
one.
Yes. Because, I mean, you are going to fail. You can't always be the good girl who always does the right thing all the time. That's not how real life works. And guys are not that afraid of, I'm sorry, fucking it up and just messing it up. They just go for it and they say, oh, okay, so I made a mistake here. I'm going to get up. Now I'm going to do it better. So the next time I fall, I'm going to learn from this next fall. But we as girls are taught to be nice. Don't run too fast. Don't talk too loud. Just be nice, be beautiful. Don't
throw
take
that to the wall and go for it.
So, yeah, I think it starts from very early ages, actually. From mothers, teachers, everybody around us, because we need all people, regardless of sex and whatever orientation, etc., to contribute from their best ability. And that's actually what blockchain is about. So it's about everybody. And
it's just a very inclusive industry, and you're right, it's back to basics of influencing this from school, from when you're a child, where the industry is, what you can do, what your ability is, but also promotion of failure. I don't think it's promoted enough. I think it, as you quite rightly say, don't fail. Where it's like, no, you need to make sure you pass, you have to pass, no room for failure. Where it's actually, you learn from failure. Because then you reflect and say, okay, well, this didn't go right, this didn't go right. So now I'm going to try this and make it an alternative way. And you've learned something. Otherwise, you're just following a BAU process without having your knowledge grown, your skill set tested and tried to be able to actually develop in an industry which is evolving.
Yes, and I think if I'm just listening to you, if you live that way, are you really living?
This is a good point. Probably not, to be honest, because do you lose your creativity? Do you get to apply any of it throughout your day-to-day work? And let's face it, we work more than we do not.
Yeah.
But then what you return is far greater, and it's really exciting. And I think it should be a prime example, even with you, Kristiina, of what you can do with just pushing yourself outside of that box and trying and testing new ways and going into new industries that you don't necessarily know and just failing and then trying again and making it work, because that's where you've got to where you are today, and that's where you have the knowledge you have from all these different angles. It's because you've just tried it and you've put it into place and built your knowledge and been able to get where you are. So I think it's a really, really, really valid point.
I really like what there's a character in Harry Potter, Hermione Granger.
Oh,
in one episode, she says, someone comes up to her and tell her that, oh, she's so a good witch and she knows this and that and she's better than others. And then she just pauses and says, no, I'm not smarter than others. I'm not better than others. I just think logically. So it's not, and this is what I'm teaching my girls as well.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that there's something you don't know, just then go and figure it out. Learn, read, and think. It's up to you. Everybody has this ability. You can do it. It's not some sort of mystical thing someone else did.
You're born with it or you're not. It's no, you can do it. Anyone can, from all walks of life, are able to go into that sort of area.
So it's just about taking that, well, kind of maybe crossing the fear and just going in there and maybe not thinking too much and just doing it.
No, that's it. Just don't think, just do, and then think after. Maybe not with everything.
Yeah.
Oh, well, look, to round this up, is there any last words you would say to kind of influence or encourage people to just get going with this particular industry, whether it's coming in as a graduate or senior leaders looking to change industry, or kind of medium people, managers looking to also change?
Well, do your research. I mean, I always do. Do as much research as you can.
Yeah.
And if you feel that this is what you want to do, then really go for it. Because even if something fails, I mean, I'm not saying that you fail, but let's say something fails, something happens on the market that's beyond your control.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, what's the worst thing that can happen? You just get up and move on.
Brush yourself off and go again.
Yeah, because I mean, I was reading about blockchain before a lot. Everybody was writing about blockchain. But from whatever I was reading, I really couldn't understand what it is, how it works. So I wanted to understand, so I had to go in, get my hands dirty, and understand how it works. And I don't think there's any other way. So if you want to bake a cake, you have to get your hands dirty.
Roll your sleeves up, you get involved, and you see what happens. And that's what it is almost. It's having the leadership and managerial styles, but it's also back to basics. How can you actually implement the frameworks, controls, understand the regulatory obligations, and as you say, just roll your sleeves up, get on with it. Because it's not a delegated industry really, where you have the leadership and they delegate to all of the teams. You all get stuck in, but then the expertise shared amongst the teams is far greater.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much creation going on in that industry at the moment and for years to come, that if you have also this, not just a curiosity and curious mind, but you want to build something, you want to be a creator, that's the industry where you can create whatever.
Well, look, to wrap this up, it's been absolutely amazing talking to you. It's really, really inspiring and more refreshing to hear people actually influencing failure and why it's good and the outcomes you get from it, because I think it's not done enough. But I want to thank you so much, Kristiina, for coming onto the podcast, explaining a bit about your background, where you've got to where you are today, Coinmetro, the evolution of blockchain, and what we can do to influence talent coming into this industry. So it was really, really great to speak to you, and we will always be in touch as well.
Thank you.
Cheers. Bye.